This looks bad, I know. Well, she deserved it. She came in here, distracting me from Mother, from caring for Mother. No one separates a boy and his mother. How did she get here, you may ask? Ending up at the wrong end of a knife fight with no knife. Well, her clothes on in that regards. Really? She was murdered by a mysterious person who shall not be known to the... Well, I'm sure you know. It was me all along, but that's besides the point of this right now. The movie, myself are discussing Psycho, the 1960 Alfred Hitchcock, Grace to Humanity. The plot is quite complicated. Marion, the poor darling who I have sliced and diced, was being looked by the police officer stealing $40,000 from her employer in hopes to run off with her lover who was in a different county of California. Right in between hers and his was my little Bates Motel, right off the old highway, which she took a wrong turn off of. In order to seek refuge from the police, she came to me, but she tempted me. That led to me being investigated by police, no longer, and then the family, and now I'm here. That Marion Crane tempted me with her thoughts and made me think of other than Mother. No one separates a boy and his mother. It's crazy to believe that a lot of the movie relied on something that was so barren, the script. There was not much dialogue compared to the action and to the movement of the characters, and Alfred Hitchcock was known for that during his earlier films. Not letting the characters speak, really heavily dependent on the actor's portrayal of the characters rather than their speech. This horror and melodrama film was all about the surrounding theme of karma and influence. The running away to be with Sam, the changing of the bra color after Marion steals all the money, the way that everything was watching through the peephole. Everything was so perfectly placed, and every wrong action a character did was dealt with. The way the script had been written, where everything wasn't straightforward and the twist at the end was just perfectly set up, it made the audience properly set up the story for themselves, something that Alfred Hitchcock was known to do with his stories. They let the audience figure it out themselves. They let the audience put that stuff together through the context and the subtext of each and every scene. Not everything made perfect sense, but that was the whole point of classic cinema. Because the point of view is third-person omniscient, we get a lot of what the characters know. We get a lot of what the characters don't know. And we, as the audience, you, as the audience, got to make up a lot of who I was right before the end. The script only had enough detail to really set the characters up for the punches where they needed to go. And it so perfectly, completely foreshadowed the twist end, but no one expected it. I never let them expect it. It was such memorable movie, memorable quotes that still sit with you to this day.
And through the script, the mise-en-scène is brought to life, the opposite of the PI, it seems.
And then the cinematography really kicks in. The mise-en-scène, Alfred Hitchcock and John J.
The film is not fiction. It was a real-life story that was created into a fictional book, then adapted into a film, based on real-life killer and psychopath Ed Gein.
And then the cinematography really kicks in. Alfred Hitchcock and John Russell really had to know what they were doing. The partnership between the two of them brought the whole movie together. Every angle, every cut, every pan, every still shot. Perfection.
The film was so eerily real, so nightmarish, so dreamlike. It stunned those who knew the reality of Ed Gein's women corsets and lip drawings.
I know, Mother. And the black and white was a budgeting choice on behalf of Hitchcock, seeing as Universal didn't want to give him enough money to actually produce such a large film with a large budget. He saw the great blockbusting movies in black and white films and said that he could do the same thing, and just by giving the homage to Orson Welles' films, he did just what he had to do.
Also real to reflect.
The shots and the scenery made the film more realistic as well. From the real pond to the toilet flushing, which was a first for film. Up until then, it had never been done until Hitchcock did this in Psycho. It was something that had never been done before. There was nothing to simulate fiction or animation. It was all as real as it could be, with sets at Universal and on real locations.
Enough to send chills down the spines of everyone from the 1960s to the present.
It was perfect! It was also perfect! lot of it was also in the camera angles. Still bleeding from current film styles at the time into film noir, Hitchcock really relied on eye-level angles to harsher angles, than as to such looking up at the character, or down at a character rather than directly at them. This was to insinuate what you should really be feeling when looking at a character, not what you want to be feeling. If you're looking at a character eye to eye, you know exactly where you are. This gave them a lowered sense of importance when looking down on them, belittling them or making them smaller than the whole of the cast. Or looking up at them, which made them seem larger than life, more important than anything else. Camera shots were everything to the storytelling, as well as most of the movie, and were even used to tell a lot of the plot. Starting with long shots. They were mostly used in establishing locales such as my house, the motel, Marion's car on the side of the highway. Medium shots, used for dialogue, were super important in Hitchcock films. Because he relied mostly on action over dialogue, the scenes where you got dialogue were the most important to pay attention to. Therefore, every second Sam was talking to Arbogast, every time Marion glanced at me, every single time anyone had anything to say to anyone else, being eye level with them was the most important thing you could get out of that scene. Usually the actors were stationary in this time, so you could gain more out of it, you know. But the most important part of this film was the close-ups. That way you could see the little intricate details Hitchcock wanted you to see that no one else could see otherwise. When Marion was writing her numbers on the notes, the second that Norman flipped open the peephole to look at Sam and... Lila was her name. When Marion is driving her car, you can see the close-up of her face. When Marion is dead, you can see the close-up of her eye, looking towards the money, the most important thing to her before she gets slaughtered. I don't know it's there, but the audience does. By all of this, Hitchcock really had the mise-en-scène in his hands. He always did with his films. This was no exception. Proxemics were extremely important. Me being so distant from the car, me being so close to the pond. You could really tell what a character was like, how they acted and what they thought about the other characters when it came to proxemics. Movement was another big thing. Hitchcock wanted the actors to move quickly, suggesting panic, knowing that I was after everyone in every second. They never knew when to turn, they never knew when to hide. This was very common because on stage in an early film noir, this was the way to act. Film noir had a very specific way for actresses to act. Be smitten, luxurious, gaspful. And the men were stoic and hard-faced and didn't act and didn't really say much. But then I came around, and I changed the playing game. The audience knew what we were thinking and what we were feeling based on our body movements, except for me. The beauty of this movie was the editing. It was extremely important because of the shower scene, which, fun fact, had over 50 angles and 77 different cuts. It was mostly to avoid showing Janet Leigh's nipples and her lady business. So, covering her moleskin in with patches and making sure that the angles were different and the cuts were exact. No nudity was shown. That shower scene was also crucial because it was able to show the murder without actually showing Janet Leigh being stabbed, which was another crucial thing about censorship. Had she been stabbed, the movie would not have been in production. And then Bernard Herrmann is introduced, the soundtrack god of this movie. Hitchcock never actually wanted a soundtrack for this movie at the beginning. However, Bernard took it upon himself to do one, and then showed Hitchcock a film cut version with his soundtrack in it, and when the shower scene was shown, Hitchcock immediately demanded that Bernard Herrmann be put on the soundtrack. And now we have one of the most influential, iconic soundtracks in film history ever. The editing of this movie, for timing, is something along the lines of High Noon. Because the movie is shot, or the story is told, over a span of 2 to 3 days, the editing and jump cuts had to be so precise you wouldn't even realize it. And that was the beauty of classic editing. But the way that Hitchcock delicately and intricately made this timing so realistic was how the audience felt. They felt like this actually did happen over a span of a few days, not this happened in an hour and 45 minutes. As I had mentioned before, the acting was crucial in the entirety of this movie. Thank goodness all the characters and all the actors Hitchcock was familiar with. He used the majority of the cast members of this movie in his cast of Alfred Hitchcock's Presents, which was his Twilight Zone-esque film series debuted live on television in the early 1950s and late 1950s. That way he knew how to work with these cast members. However, Norman Bates, played by, well, me, Anthony Perkins, was new to him. He knew of him but had never worked with him, so introducing this new, not necessarily known style of character was very, very different. However, after this movie, he was specifically typecast for the psycho character. This also led to the audience really connecting with the cast members. Because they knew all the cast members from Alfred Hitchcock's Presents, but not knowing Anthony Perkins, this really set up the stage for the cast members to be able to portray their characters in such a realistic way.
Alfred Hitchcock's masterpiece Psycho changed the game of cinema in more ways than one. Being inspired by the horrific crimes of Ed Gein, Psycho shocked audiences nationwide. Despite being given a small budget, Hitchcock, along with cinematographer John L. Russell, composer Bernard Herrmann, and the talented cast were able to cement Psycho's place in movie history, accumulating 4 Oscar nominations and the 1961 Golden Globe for Best Supporting Actress going to Janet Leigh. Its presence in pop culture will live on thanks to the creation of the successful prequel show, Bates Motel. But I'm just rambling now. I'll just sit here and be quiet and let you enjoy the show. I hope you are watching. You'll see, and you'll be on the very edge of your seat the entire time. My son's eyes haunted audiences as I spoke over him. Chills creep along your backs when you hear my famous final words at the end. Why, she wouldn't even harm a fly.